Welcome to State of Tech. This is James, and I'm going to take you through the setup process of an iPod Touch for your child. Now, this process and setup video is going to take you in through opening up the iPod for the first time. You see, we're going to be brought to this screen when we first set up our new iPod. I'm going to show you how to go through the process of setting it up, creating an Apple ID for your child, and how to monitor that Apple ID. And then also at the same time, how to set up some restrictions on the device so that way you can monitor the apps that are downloaded and the in-app purchases and anything like that that you're going to want to disable, such as Safari, web browsers, or anything like that for your child. Now, if you're setting up an iPod, an iPad, or an iPhone for yourself for the first time and would like more information on how to do so, we've got videos for that as well. And go ahead and check those out at stateoftech.net or also on our YouTube channel. But for this circumstance, again, we're going to set it up like we were setting it up for our child. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide over the screen, and it's going to bring us into the initial setup screen where we're going to select the language for our device. Now, you can scroll through and actually select a language from all these languages here. The language that you select here is going to be the language for the device in every sort of submenu. So if you wanted it to be set up in Spanish or anything like that, go ahead and select a different language. But we're going to go ahead and select English for now. We can then select our country or region. And if you're in a different region, go ahead and scroll through this list and select the one that you need to use. But by default, it's going to automatically try and select the region that you purchased your iPod in. And for this circumstance, we were in the United States. Go ahead and tap on there, and then we can now be presented with a choose a Wi-Fi network or connect to iTunes down here at the bottom. The reason that this screen comes up is it needs to connect either to iTunes or to a Wi-Fi network to actually activate our iPod and to continue the setup process. Being that the iPod is a Wi-Fi only device, I would suggest connecting it to Wi-Fi, and this is going to be the easiest way to set up your device. And it's actually going to be the way that we're going to go through in this video. But if you want to connect it through iTunes, it's basically the same process. You would just plug in the cable to your iPod and plug it into your computer and open up iTunes, and then it'll activate that way. And then for the rest of the process, it's pretty much going to be the same for setting up the iPod. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in the Wi-Fi password for my network, and then I'm going to bring the iPad back into the video. Once I've selected the network and I've put in the password, all I'm going to do is tap join, and then it's going to join that network, and I'm going to get a blue little check mark here on the side, and then it's going to activate my iPod. And now I'm going to be presented with the option of enabling location services. Now, location services are going to be useful for maps and other applications to gather and use our data, including our location. I typically leave this on, and I would suggest you do so too, because when you come to the Find My iPod feature, which will allow you to locate the iPod, it'll need to have location services enabled for that feature to work. Now, Find My iPod is going to allow you to log in with an Apple ID and view where the approximate location of the iPod is, as long as they're connected to a Wi-Fi network. Now, if you disable this location services, you won't be able to use the Find My iPod feature, so this feature kind of comes with a double-edged sword. I wouldn't typically want to leave it on for a child, but I recommend leaving it on just to be able to use the Find My iPod feature to be able to track where the iPod's location is. So for this circumstance, it's going to be really up to you and how you want to use this. I would really recommend enabling location services just for the simple fact that when we do the Find My iPod, we'll be able to use that. Now, for setting up the iPod Touch, we have options of setting it up as a new iPod, a restore from an iCloud backup, or restore from an iTunes backup. Now, if your child had a previous iPod and you wanted to restore it, it's going to act like that they had never switched iPods. It'll transfer over all their applications, any photos they've taken, any messages if they've had iMessage before, any sort of backgrounds, any settings, folders, anything that they've done to the iPod. It'll transfer over to this new one if you choose one of these restore features. And the restore option is going to be whether from iCloud or iTunes, and that's just going to be how you've backed up your child's device before. So if you're restoring from iCloud, you're going to need to have an iOS device that has 5.0 or above to have an iCloud account. And then iTunes is just the simple fact of plugging in your iPod to the computer and backing up through iTunes. So if you're going to restore, you're going to choose the method that you've been backing up to before. For this video, we're just going to set it up as a new iPod, brand new out of the box, and we're going to enable some stuff on this. Now, if you do a backup, restore from backup, when we get to the home screen of this video, which you can go ahead and skip there if you want to, we're going to show you how to enable some restrictions to disable Safari, in-app purchases, and also how to monitor the app usage on the iPod. So go ahead and skip to that portion if you're looking to set up that once you do a backup. But for now, we're just going to go and set this up as a new iPod. Now, once we do that, we're going to be asked to sign in with our Apple ID. If you want to give your child access to your Apple ID, that's up to you. You can go and sign in with yours up here by tapping sign in. But keep in mind, that's going to create a little bit of a problem because your iMessages and your email and your backups and any app purchases that you have are going to be able to be accessed from this iPod if you sign in with your Apple ID and not create them a free one if you wanted to. You're also able to skip this step if you wanted to skip that entirely and just monitor it later on. But for this process, we're going to create a new Apple ID for our child. Some advantages of them having their own iCloud account is the iMessage feature. They'll be able to send iMessage and FaceTime video calls back and forth between iOS devices. Now, being that we're going to create them a new ID, it's going to be based upon an email address with their Apple ID. So not anybody could just message or FaceTime them. That person that's trying to message them will have to know the Apple ID email address that you've set up for them to be able to message and FaceTime them. And you'll see that later on in the video once we get to that step on how to set that up. And also we'll get, with iCloud, you get access to sync photos, contacts, calendars, and even mail with iCloud. And then there's also that, what I mentioned earlier, is the Find My iPod feature that we can use with iCloud. So we're going to go ahead and come back up here and begin setting up a new Apple ID. We'll tap Create Free Apple ID, and then we're going to have to go ahead and enter in all of their birth date information. It's going to be determine the appropriate services to retrieve for your password if you forget it. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in all of my information here for this example. When I'm ready to, I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. And now I'm going to be asked to enter in my name, so I'll go ahead and do that right here. Now I have the option of creating an Apple ID. I can use my current email address or get a free iCloud email address. If your child doesn't have an email address, we'll just go ahead and tap Get a Free iCloud email. But if you have a current email address for them that you'd like to use, you can go ahead and tap Use Current. And we can also have a change email address here if we have an Apple ID that currently uses the email address that we no longer use. For this circumstance, we're just going to go ahead and tap Get a Free iCloud email. I'll tap Next, and then now I can choose the iCloud email address that I'd like to use. So let's go ahead and make one up for ourselves. Typically, you might want to use your child's name, or if they have like a nickname, you can go ahead and use that for them. I'm just going to go ahead and set one up here for myself. Now, once you've set up the email, you're going to be asked to confirm that you want to create that. So I'm going to tap Create. So you go ahead and create that iCloud email. Sometimes you might run into the circumstance where an Apple ID has already been used with that account. And we can go ahead and reset a forgotten password if we want to. Or we can go ahead and type in a different email address. Now that we've created the account, we're going to have to enter in our Apple ID password. So go ahead and enter in a password that you will know, that you don't have to give out to your child, that you can always come back and enter in this password when they want to buy an app or buy a music or anything like that. So make this a password that you can remember, but it's also secure that they don't know as well. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit Next. And it's going to bring us into the security question area where we're going to have to enter in a few different security questions. I'm going to go ahead and do that and then bring the iPod back into the video. Once you've entered in the security questions, you're going to be asked to enter in a rescue email if you'd like to. So that way, in case if you forget the Apple ID password and need to have it reset, you can have it sent to this email address here that you choose. Now, for this one, it could be your current existing email address. Your child won't never see this email or know about it. It's just going to be for reset purposes in case you forget the Apple ID password. You can skip this step if you would like to. You can just go ahead and hit next, and we're just going to go ahead and do that for now. We can choose to get email updates with Apple, which will send us to the Apple ID email. Go ahead and disable that if you want to. Your child might not need to know what's going on with Apple and get more product information, but that's totally up to you. For this one, we're going to disable that. Hit next, and then we're going to be brought to the next screen where we're going to agree with the terms and conditions. Go ahead and read through this and then tap agree when you're ready to, and then agree again. Now it's going to set up the Apple ID for us. And once we're ready to go, it's going to take us to the next screen where we're going to start setting up more of the process here for ourselves to get ready. Now for iCloud, we're going to be asked to use iCloud, which is again going to sync our music, photos, contacts, calendars, and all of that across each one of our devices. iCloud is going to be the way that we're going to use the Find My iPod feature to actually track our child's location with the iPod and also use iMessages. So if you want to use that, go ahead and tap use. If you don't want them to use that, just tap don't. Well, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and let them use that so I can use the Find My iPod. And here is the Find My iPod feature that I've been talking about that allows you to track the location and lock and erase the iPod even if it was stolen or misplaced. And if your iPod happens to get misplaced in the house, you'll be able to sign in with the Apple ID, log in, and actually play a sound, whether the iPod's on silent or loud, to be able to find the iPod in your house. So I really highly recommend using this feature on the iPod. It's going to update our iCloud settings and take us into the next screen. For this one, we're going to be asked to create a passcode. And this is going to be a 4-digit passcode that we can set up to remember ourselves or for our child. This gives us an extra layer of security on our device. So that way, whenever we try to access this device from the lock screen, we'll be asked to enter in our passcode that we set up. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and set up a passcode just because I'd like to know that my child's iPod is secure and not anybody can just pick it up. So go ahead and enter in your 4-digit passcode. For a simple passcode, you see this commonly used and can be easily guessed. You can come up with your own, but for this one, I'm just going to use this code since we're doing this for the video. If you wanted to actually skip that, you see there was an option to skip the passcode setup if you wanted to. And once we're done with creating a passcode, it's going to bring us into the next page where we have the iCloud keychain. The iCloud keychain keeps our passwords that we generate and credit card information in storage, a secure storage that syncs across each one of our devices. If your child has more than one iPod on iOS 7, you can use this feature, but I would recommend just setting it up later because I don't think that they'll need that feature, especially if we're going to disable Safari. Now, Siri is the next screen. With Siri, we can use simple voice commands to get things done. We can send messages, dictate notes, find restaurants, find movie times, turn on basic settings. There's a wide plethora of things that we can do with Siri. But Siri does need an internet connection. We're going to need to be connected to Wi-Fi to use Siri. And it could be a back route of getting to Safari if we have it disabled or getting to web searches for specific things. Now, there are restrictions that we can set up for Siri for specific explicit language or web searches. So we're going to go ahead and just use Siri for now. But when we get to the restrictions, we're going to actually restrict some things that Siri can do. If you don't want your child to be able to use Siri to do voice commands on the iPod, go ahead and tap don't use, but for this one, we're going to use it, but go ahead and set up restrictions later on. Now, diagnostics and usage, I typically leave this one off because it uses and tracks the usage of the device, such as app crashes or location data, anything like that, and it's going to send it back to Apple to help them make their products better. I don't like to do this, so I usually leave this off, but if you're one that likes to do that, go ahead and tap automatically send. Don't send, and now we're to our welcome to iPod screen. Tap get started, and it's going to take us to our home screen of our iPod. Now the next step that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and enable some restrictions to disable some features on this iPod for our child. I'm going to tap on these settings, come here into my general tab, and then come down here to the restrictions. So I'm going to tap on that, and now I can tap enable restrictions. So tapping on that is going to ask me to enter in a passcode. This password in the restrictions menu is going to be for you alone. So make sure this is a password that you can remember and not give to your child. And again, it's going to be separate from the main one. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a different passcode for this one. I'll be asked to confirm it. And then now I'm in the restrictions menu. And this is where we're going to start disabling features to keep our child from using different functions. So there's quite a few different things we can use in here. Safari, if we'd like to disable the web browser feature, we can go ahead and tap on that, and it's going to slide that off and disable Safari from being used. Now we can purchase other third-party applications from in the App Store, and some of them we can actually install and download to track and monitor the usage. We can go through those applications in a different video. For this one, we're just showing you how to get through the basics of setting up the device. Now, we have more features here. We have the camera. We can disable it from taking photos, FaceTime, the FaceTime calls, iTunes Store. We can disable that altogether. Installing, deleting, and in-app purchases. These are all functions of the App Store. So if we wanted them to be able to install applications, but not do in-app purchases, we can go ahead and slide that off. So that way they don't accidentally charge to our credit card $99 worth of in-app purchases to unlock different levels in Candy Crush or something like that. So that's a nice feature to disable of in-app purchases. But to leave installing apps, at least they can download free apps. And currently there is no credit card associated with this account. So there's going to be no real way of them downloading a 99-cent app altogether, let alone in-app purchases. So we can go ahead and leave that enabled. And for deleting apps, if you actually wanted to see what applications your child was actually downloading and installing, go ahead and slide that off, and it's actually going to keep them from deleting any apps they install. So that way, if you come grab their device anytime, you can see what applications are installed on the device at any given moment. Now, Siri, you see earlier we enabled Siri, but if we'd like to disable it here in this menu, we can go ahead and slide that off. And then AirDrop allows us to wirelessly transfer photos, documents, files, Safari web pages, anything like that to iOS 7 devices. If you'd like to disable that, go ahead and do so here. That's more of a precaution. It depends on who else you're allowing them to AirDrop to. I keep it on because maybe I take a photo on my iPhone, and say if I wanted my kid to have that same photo, I could AirDrop it to them really easily. But at the same time, you could use iMessage to send that photo to them as well. So that's more of a personal call. I would probably honestly disable that for a child to keep them from being able to just wirelessly transfer things over AirDrop. It's a little bit less monitored. You don't have any track history, where in messages you can actually go in as long as they're not being deleted and see what's being taken place and sent back and forth on the iPod. Now down below we have allowed content. We can choose ratings for the app stores and everything like that. Now ratings for, if we tap in here, this is going to allow ratings for our current region, which we're in the United States, but if you're in a different region, go ahead and pick the region you're in so that way you can get the ratings for that. Come back out here, and now we can choose the rating system for all of our movies and apps and everything like that. Music and podcasts, we can allow explicit content. I'd go ahead and shut that off if I had a child. I'd want them to be able to listen to things that aren't full of filthy language or anything like that. Movies, we can actually restrict the highest rating that a movie will on our device will be allowed. Right here, if they're under 13, you're giving them this device. I think a PG-13 is totally fine. But if you have a different rating system, go ahead and choose the highest rating you want for movies to be able to be purchased on this device. Same thing with TV shows. We can go here. We have all the way up to TVMA, allow all, or we can go ahead and restrict down to maybe a TV PG or a TV 14. Again, this is depending upon your own personal rating system, but go ahead and set the level here. The same thing happens with apps. We have apps that are age bracketed. We can 17 plus, 12 plus, 9 plus. For this one, we can go ahead and leave it at 12 plus. But again, it's your own rating system. Do so in these menus how you choose. Now with Siri, we can allow explicit language and web search content. Now, being that I disabled Safari, they can't use Safari to search the web, but they would be able to use Siri. So for these ones, I don't want Siri speaking back explicit language, and I don't want them to be able to search the web. That's the whole reason I disabled Safari in the first place, was to keep the web search content from being done. So go ahead and disable that in Siri. They can still use Siri to send messages and do all the basic other functions. They just can't use it to do the web searches. And then websites, we don't really have to worry about this area because we already disabled Safari. But if you wanted to leave Safari on, you could actually come in here and limit adult content, and that way they don't actually visit adult websites. And then if we wanted to specific websites, we can go ahead and tap and allow just the websites in here in this menu that we add. So in this feature, if I tap edit in the top right hand corner, I can actually delete or add websites to this list that my child is approved to go on to. And they won't be able to navigate to any other websites but the ones that I have here in this list. So this is an alright feature if you want to leave Safari enabled but limit them to a specific amount of websites. You could do it in this manner. And again, if you wanted them just to be able to not view adult content, go ahead and tap that and it's going to block adult content. And then all websites is going to give them pure access. But again, up here at the top, we disabled Safari, so that section doesn't have any sort of pertinent information that we need. And then the required password immediately for purchases is going to be enabled by default since we have restrictions enabled. Now we have some privacy settings down here for location services, contacts, calendars, reminders, photos, Bluetooth, microphone, Twitter, Facebook, and advertising. They all basically have the same options here. So if I tap on calendars, it's going to allow me to disallow changes or allow changes to be made to calendars. So if I wanted to give them basic access to all these functions and I wanted to set up all of the contacts for them and not have them edit any of the information, I would go ahead and come in here and say not allow changes. So that way the contacts and calendars and reminders and everything that I've set up on the phone can't be erased or deleted. And I would have to come in here in restrictions and disable them and enable them again to allow them to be changed. So again, in these menus, that is totally up to you how you want to set it up. You can allow changes to be made or not allow changes to be made in these privacy settings. And then down here at the bottom, we have allow changes to accounts, background app refresh, and a volume limit. Accounts is going to be any sort of like mail, contacts, calendars, adding in a new email address, adding in another iMessage account, anything like that. We can go ahead and allow these changes or not allow them. And then the background app refresh. Some applications use app refresh in the background to keep current statuses updated. Like say Facebook, for example, will run in the background so that when you open it back up again, it allows you to pick up right where you left off. Or even some music apps or running apps or anything like that that's going to want to use the background to run in the background even when it's not currently being the app in use. You can go ahead and restrict that by tapping here to allow changes or not allow. And then volume limit. This is going to be a volume limit that we set up in the music app. And then we can go ahead and lock that volume limit in there to not allow changes to be made. And I'll show you where that's at here in just a second. And then Game Center is the last option where we can allow them to play multiplayer games and add friends in Game Center. So that way, whenever they download a game on the App Store, it's going to allow them to play multiplayer with anyone across the world that has Game Center accounts. And so if you didn't want that to be an option, go ahead and disable this multiplayer games right here by just sliding that off. And then you can allow them to add friends. But again, they're going to have to know the email address to add them as a friend like they did earlier with iMessages. But if they're playing a game with someone, they can get a friend request just by playing the game. So it's a toss-up on this one. I would just say for this one, I would just go and disable that one as well. Now notice if we come out of restrictions, we'll come back out into our general settings. And I'm going to go ahead and take you into the music settings. Come here, and then we have a volume limit. If I go ahead and slide this down, it's going to restrict the limit of the amount of volume that can come through the actual device. So if you didn't want your child listening to music too loud, you would go ahead and come in here and set this volume. Now come back out here into the settings. Come scroll back up to general. Come back into your restrictions. And see, when I tap on restrictions, I'm asked to enter in that passcode I did. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the passcode that I created earlier that's totally separate. Now come back down here into the actual volume limit that we saw earlier. And now when I tap on volume limit, and if I don't allow changes, now the volume that I just set in the music settings is going to be the maximum volume the device will output when listening to headphones or using the device in general. So that's going to be the way that we're going to set up restrictions for our child. And now if I come to the home screen, you're going to see Safari was down here in this menu. It's no longer there, so now I don't have any web searches to be able to be done on Safari. And then I can come into the App Store, use the Apple ID, and search for secure web browsers or a web browser that I can monitor myself. And then with iMessage, you see here, we can go ahead and start creating iMessages to send to people that have iMessage enabled as well. Now, if we come into the settings, one last option we're going to go through, and you see it with mail contacts calendars. If I tap on there and if I tap add account, you see I can add a secondary iCloud account. So if you wanted to add their iCloud account onto your device, or say your computer, your Mac, to be able to monitor their iMessages back and forth, you can do so by adding a secondary account. And that's just if you wanted to keep extra tabs on them. Again, everything in this video is just a suggestion. You don't have to follow these practices. Every option for setting up the content for your child is going to be totally up to you. But we just wanted to make sure here at State of Tech that you knew the options that were available for you when setting up this device for your child before giving it to them, so that way that you know and you can monitor their usage in this digital world. For more tips, if you'd like to learn more tips on setting up mail accounts or adding applications to these iPod or monitoring iMessages and seeing how photos can be sent back and forth, be sure and go to stateoftech.net and check out more of our setup guides. And if you are doing more for the iPad or an iPhone, we're going to have setup guides for those as well. Now, the iPhone is going to be basically the same thing as the iPod, but the iPad is a little bit different. So go ahead and check out those videos if you want to. And for more quick tips, anything like that, be sure and visit stateoftech.net.